American immigration policy?
No. I'm not saying that at all. Okay. I'm not saying that.
Because hundreds of thousands of Americans died fighting the Nazis.
Absolutely. But what did happen is America turned its back on refugees during that period, just like we're turning our back on refugees right now. We're not responsible for the crisis in Syria, but we do have some responsibility to protect the refugees who are fleeing for their lives.
Okay. Well, I guess here's why I asked that first question. I think you've got a legitimate point of view. Lots of people I know are for admitting refugees, for sure. When you invoke the phrase American values, though, it suggests a set of absolute rules, and I'm not sure I know what those rules are.
Right.
So let's get right to what the rules are about American values, as you put it. So who has a right to come here?
Who has a right to come here? I mean, it's not about having a right to come here. It's about America standing up for refugees.
So America has an obligation. I mean, I think we're saying basically the same thing. So America has an obligation.
Refugees don't have a right to come here per se, but a refugee who's been approved for refugee status by the United States government should be allowed to come here, and they were all turned away. I had to spend my Saturday dealing with a Syrian mother, her 5-year-old daughter, her 8-year-old, then their 8-year-old daughter, who was trying to join her husband who had asylum in Connecticut.
Right.
They had an approval notice. They had been cleared and vetted. They got on a plane in Inhumane, where they'd been living as refugees for 3 years. They get to Kiev to connect to the flight to JFK, and they get turned around and get sent back to Inhumane.
That sounds like a nightmare. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to them. I am. But I want to get back to the core principle here, because I think it's really important. You're saying it is an American value to admit refugees, and I'm asking you what the standards are. There are 60 million refugees around the world, according to the United Nations, and there are countless hundreds of millions of other people fleeing, I don't know, poverty, bad government, bad education, no health care, starving to death in some cases. What percentage of those do we have an obligation under the American values you refer to admit?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you one thing. The percentage is not zero. And so that's the percentage.
But tell me what the criteria are.
I'm not going to go over what percentage.
This is what you do for a living. Tell me.
Sure.
You invoked American values and suggested anyone who's against what you're for is somehow in contravention of American values.
Well,
it's a big thing to say. America
has been welcoming refugees throughout its history, with some very shameful interruptions, such as the interruption between 1921 and 1965.
I got it. You said that. So, but you're not answering the question, which is, how do I know which refugees need to come here if I'm going to apply the American values that you're referring to? Like, what are the rules? If you're going to run around with moral statements like, oh, you're a bad person because you're against refugees, tell me what the rules are so I can be a good person.
Yeah, the rules are that you need to welcome those people who need protection. The United States needs to play a role. You see, the United States is a leader in refugee protection, and what makes us a leader isn't the number that we take. It's the way that we treat refugees when they come here. When a refugee comes to the United States, he's not known as a refugee. We don't put them in camps. We welcome them as new Americans.
Put them in camps? No, we spend a lot of money on them, huge amounts of money on them, as you know. We spend a lot of money in your organization, which takes a lot of tax dollars.
But here's my... Tucker, I'm not arguing against that. If you're going to raise that, Tucker, I'm glad you raised that. I'm really glad you raised that.
I wasn't attacking you. I'm merely saying we're very generous. That's the point I'm making. And I think we should be.
Let me tell you how generous you are.
You are not answering the question, which is, in a world where there are tens or hundreds of millions of people who are fleeing all sorts of awful things, life or death situations, how do we know what our obligation is? You said we have an obligation. You do this for a living. You've thought a lot about it. You're a smart guy. Tell me so I can evaluate all future policies through that lens. Right, well, and you're dodging it.
Well, first of all, Tucker, you just said my organization takes a lot of tax dollars, so I'm obligated to respond to that. Okay. So let me respond to it.
Okay, fine.
Let me respond to it.
But get to my question, though.
I will, I promise.
Quickly, thanks.
So we get $2,075 per refugee. That is true from the State Department. What do we do with that? We pick them up at the airport. We bring them to the apartment, which we've rented. We pay 3 months' rent for that apartment. We stock it with food. We put furniture in it. We get the kids in school.
You're great.
We get them to medical appointments.
Great.
Okay?
I'm glad.
We get them transportation.
Okay. But you're dodging the question.
We get them a job. We teach them English. I pay my staff with that money. $2,075. Try to pay rent for 3 months with that amount of money. Right. You know how we do it? Because we have to raise lots of private funds. We have lots of volunteers who participate
Mark, you're a little defensive on the question. I would point out, we looked at your IRS forms. Actually, it looks like the majority of the money you get comes from taxpayers, just for the record.
That's correct, 60%. And I just told you.
Right, that's fine. So they have an interest in knowing what the rules are, what the policy is, right? It's not just you and a private organization raising money from good-hearted people. You're taking money from people by force through the tax code. The government's giving you money,
No.
and it's our money.
No.
So just answer my question. How do we know when we have an obligation to let someone in? Why not let all 60 million? Do we have an obligation to do that? And if not,
No,
why not?
absolutely
60
not.
million fleeing from harm. Why don't we have an
Absolutely
obligation
not.
to let them in?
We have an obligation to see how can we play a role. How can the United States make refugees safe by taking some and then allowing the host country to protect
You're
the
not
others.
answering. So here's
I am
one other
answering your
point.
question.
I mean, but not with any specificity that's useful for our
look at
viewers.
vulnerability.
For our
We
viewers.
look at
Okay, here's the point
vulnerability.
that you made in your statement. To deprive refugees of safe haven is to scapegoat vulnerable human beings and
Correct.
to confuse those who flee terror with terror itself. Now,
Correct.
I'll just stipulate, I think most refugees are in a tough spot, and I really feel for them, and I think they're probably really good people, okay? But this statement suggests that anybody who's worried about refugees maybe hurting Americans or hating America, and some do, is some kind of crackpot or a bad person. And I could read the list of terror attacks or plots by refugees in the past couple of months. They're real. Not a ton of them, but there are some. Will you concede that people have a right to be concerned? Or are they just all bigots?
No. Of course. I mean, everybody who comes to this country should be screened, and refugees are screened more thoroughly than any immigrant, than
really?
any American. Absolutely.
So do you ask the refugees that you bring in, do you believe, for example, in female genital mutilation?
You know what? HIAS doesn't bring in refugees.
Oh, you just said that you got them jobs and
brings in
apartments and all that
refugees.
stuff.
Right.
Do you ever ask any of those people whether they believe in the Constitution, think women should have rights, think gays should be killed? Do you ask them those questions? And if you don't, why don't you?
You know what? Refugees tend to be very apolitical because they fled.
Those aren't political questions; those are cultural questions. And do you ask them? You're helping these people come to this country.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you ask them? Do you believe in the country you're coming to?
Refugees have one thing on their mind, which is they want a normal life.
Well, I'm an
they
American.
want to become Americans.
But do they believe in the Constitution? That's a fair question to ask. I'm a U.S. citizen, so
You know what?
Why wouldn't you ask that question?
Our refugees, one of the great things about this country is refugees are on a path to citizenship from the moment they enter, okay? Every refugee wants to be a citizen.
You're not going to answer any of my questions.
No, I'm going to eventually. I mean, part of that is to take a civics exam. Part of it is to swear allegiance to the Constitution.
But isn't it kind of irresponsible
So, yes.
for you not to ask, since you're, as you said, you're paying for their schooling, getting them jobs, teaching them English? You don't want a bunch of people who believe in female genital mutilation coming in the country, do you? These people, some of them are coming from countries where it's almost universal. Why wouldn't you say, we don't do that here? Why wouldn't you say that?
Homeland Security screens refugees,
Why wouldn't
not
you?
HIAS.
Oh, but you're taking all this money. I think you'd want to do that just as a responsible
I
person.
told you how much money we get. I told you what we have to do with that money.
Mark, we're out of time. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
Thank you. I did too.
Thanks. Well, Trump's executive order isn't just